Now I will give the floor to Dr. Atiya Ali Kazmi.
Thank you, Chair. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good evening to all present in this room and those joining us virtually. In the allotted time, I'll make some propositions to answer questions for this session. And as the context, here are my 4 key points based on my geopolitical analyses. First, when we talk of South Asia, the discussion spotlights on 2 and only 2 states, Pakistan and India. And the irony of their bilateral relations says it all about the prospects of stability in this part of the world. Secondly, initiatives like American rebalancing and the new Build Back Better plan, the European Union's newly announced Global Gateway project, and China's Belt and Road Initiative, these all offer multiple avenues for collective development and have been very warmly received in regions other than South Asia. But this region is so far unable to benefit due to Indian stubbornness not to engage in useful regional initiatives. India is unwilling to join BRI thus far, but due to narrow self-interest, it enjoys $100 billion plus trade with China. The third proposition is that although the United States, Russia, and China are competitors, they do cooperate in a few areas, but this practice is entirely missing in the case of South Asia. And fourth, the Indian military buildup against China has acquired a legitimate place in Western agenda setting, whereas Pakistan's rational response against India has been unable to win any support. Rather, these efforts set off alarm bells everywhere. On the question about the critical challenges and opportunities impacting peace and stability in South Asia, I'll cover political and military dimensions. Some aspects might be repetitive, but I think that they're worth repeating until they are resolved. I'll be keeping a very sharp focus on our eastern neighbor. My key assertion is that South Asia is under the burden of great power rivalries and a revisionist state's efforts to alter regional and global order. It goes without saying that we live in an unstable environment, and the nuclear risk is very high. I'll cover the disturbing political dimensions first, and we know that the issue of Kashmir is the pivot. No Pakistani recognized the Indian Constitution's erstwhile Articles 370 and 35A. However, a critical challenge to the resolution of Kashmir dispute has risen due to New Delhi's irresponsible but cleverly timed act of repealing these articles and depriving Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir of its limited autonomy. No person conscious of the international law and having a sense of history can ignore Kashmir's disputed status, illegal transfer of population from India to the occupied territories, and brutalization of Kashmiris under the largest siege in modern times. Hence, peace in South Asia is under the threat of India's toxic mix of Hindutva and expansionist footprint. For geopolitical reasons, maybe, the West turns a blind eye towards 2 grave political developments here. One is India's intentional and institutionalized drift into extremism and fundamentalism, And the second is its discrimination against minorities, especially the Muslims. While India has drifted from secularism to Hindutva-driven extremism, Pakistan has successfully weaned away from the consequences of Afghan war. Extremism has never been our choice. And extremism and radicalism in our East will have lasting impact and is even likely to generate an extra-regional effect. From the military vantage point, South Asian situation is no different. India's reckless behavior is not only being overlooked, but it's being propped up as the so-called net security provider. And other speakers have also spoken about it. West is actively assisting India in vertically proliferating, apparently to contain China. The trade waiver granted by NSG in 2008 and the 4 foundational agreements with the US are 2 major examples. I'll just quickly skip points related to Indian vertical proliferation as they have been covered. But the military technologies India is acquiring, it's very important to note that whatever technology it's acquiring using China, bogey, from the United States, its allies, as well as from any other country, directly affect Pakistan. Simply put, the key point of Indian strategic behavior is that it has been behaving irresponsibly as a nuclear power. India has made nuclear thresholds fluid. There is a need to delegitimize this nuclear brinkmanship. Let me punctuate with few examples. In 2009 Kashmir crisis, there was a muted international response to the Indian Prime Minister's nuclear threats to Pakistan. India mobilized nuclear submarines and aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea. After the pilot was captured, India resorted to nuclear brinkmanship, asserting that they would attack at 6 places, and PM Modi claimed that had Pakistan not returned the pilot, it would have been a night of massacre. Ladies and gents, India rejects strategic dialogue with Pakistan and scuttles nuclear diplomacy and arms control agreements. It has taken nuclear brinkmanship to a higher level. Unfortunately, some countries look at India as a state that was founded on Gandhi's legacy, but they miss out that now Gandhi's assassins rule the country and have their finger on the nuclear button as well. One should not forget that the Modi, Doval, Amit Shah troika are risk takers and don't understand the dynamics and risks of nuclear escalation. Therefore, I recommend that the US must play a responsible role not only in dispute but also crisis resolution in South Asia. It cannot afford to stand aloof or just profess conflict management. Media reports hold that during the February 2019 Kashmir crisis, Washington encouraged New Delhi to retaliate by exercising the right of self-defense. Allow me to remind that the UN Charter's Article 51 on the right of self-defense does not apply to situations where a state creates a false flag operation in a UN-recognized disputed territory. Later, the United States reportedly refused to clarify that their national security advisor had given a go-ahead to his Indian counterpart. The Kashmir crisis de-escalated only due to the speed of Pakistan's strong quid pro quo plus response strategy. The response was coupled with the uncertainty of an escalatory run with FSD at play. Lastly, another aspect of unstable military environment is the blatant unleashing of hybrid warfare against Pakistan through subversion, through terrorism, and through conventional maneuvers below the nuclear threshold. Ladies and gentlemen, the second question is about the impact of American withdrawal from Afghanistan. I propose that the US and Pakistan should collaborate to deal with the growing humanitarian crisis, financial viability of Afghanistan, counterterrorism, and managing refugee outflows. The recent developments in Afghanistan have strained US-Pakistan relations. American media outlets and other interest groups have held Pakistan responsible for the debacle. However, Biden administration has been comparatively a bit sanguine regarding the matter. I also propose that if the US and NATO residual forces in the region opt for counterterrorism operations, they should consider taking the Afghan government on board. This is very essential for stability in this region. The third and the last question is about the part Russia, China, and the United States can play in stabilizing the region. I'll only add to what the worthy speakers have just said that while Troika Plus are making strenuous efforts to stabilize the situation in and around Afghanistan, India will keep trying to be an arsonist and the fireman. It's giving some humanitarian aid, but is also reportedly harboring anti-Taliban elements, which is a counterproductive trend. One would expect a responsible behavior from India, and its friends could perhaps influence New Delhi for their own long-term good. And about the geopolitics of US-China relations, I'll just say that the letter is smartly focused on its very pragmatic foreign policy of economic engagements near and far, and building a community of shared futures and win-wins. And Dr. Zhao has already expressed that once dragged in competition, his country will prove itself in number and quality. So, ladies and gents, I conclude on four somber notes. First is that Pakistan does not want to be caught in the crosshairs of the global rivalries simply because it wants a peaceful rise and it needs to focus on sustainable development of its 220 million people. And secondly, the Indian and Pacific Oceans are large enough, these regions are large enough to accommodate several competing economic interests. And a zero-sum game being played at the cost of South Asia and this region shall be costly for the players that seek to use the military instrument. Thirdly, the West, through its acts of omission and commission, has vitiated South Asian region's security environment, and an unstable South Asia is not in their long-term interest. If it is part of the containment strategy of China, it's not a pragmatic focus. And I would just conclude while saying that with big power status comes responsibility that the West must take. I end here. Thank you for patient hearing.